The data streams flowed endlessly across the holographic displays in the Federation Census Bureau. Dr. Webb adjusted his spectacles and sighed as another routine species assessment crossed his desk. The Galactic Federation had been cataloging civilizations for over 3,000 years, and the process had become mind-numbingly predictable. Agricultural worlds with primitive weapons, trading societies with defensive capabilities, and the occasional mining colony with basic protection systems. Another peaceful farming world? Webb muttered, filing away the report on the Centauri colonies. Their most advanced weapon was a plasma torch designed for clearing vegetation. He reached for the next file in the queue and paused. The designation. Read Sol 3 species, human, status, preliminary assessment complete. Webb opened the file and his coffee cup slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor. The numbers couldn't be right. According to the initial survey, this species had documented over 14,000 wars in their recorded history. The weapons inventory alone filled several data cores. Webb's hands trembled as he scrolled through page after page of military conflicts, each one more devastating than most galactic civilizations had ever conceived. Computer, verify data integrity on file Sol 3 human, Webb commanded, his voice barely steady. All data verified. Sources include planetary databases, historical archives, and cultural records. The computer responded in its usual monotone. Webb stared at the screen in disbelief. These humans had fought wars using everything from sharpened sticks to devices capable of splitting atoms. They had created weapons that could poison entire continents, machines that could level cities, and strategies that prioritized total destruction of enemies. The casualty figures made Webb's stomach churn. In a single conflict labeled World War II, humans had killed over 70 million of their own kind. The communication panel buzzed. Dr. Webb, Admiral Roth requests your immediate presence in Conference Room 7. Priority urgent. Webb gathered the human files and rushed through the corridors of the Federation headquarters. Other species gave him curious glances as he hurried past, his usual calm demeanor replaced by obvious distress. He arrived at the conference room to find Admiral Roth pacing behind a massive holographic display showing the human homeworld. Webb, thank the stars you're here, Roth said, his blue skin slightly darker with stress. Please tell me there's been some kind of error in this assessment. I've triple-checked everything, Admiral. The data is accurate. Webb activated his portable display and projected the human military history into the room. They call their planet Earth, and they've been fighting continuously for their entire recorded existence. Roth studied the timeline of human conflicts. This shows they had multiple wars happening simultaneously on different continents. How is that possible? They appear to organize themselves into competing groups called nations, and these nations regularly engage in warfare with each other. But Admiral, that's not the most disturbing part. Webb highlighted a section of the data. Look at their technological development curve. They went from throwing rocks to splitting atoms in less than 10,000 years, and they weaponized every single discovery along the way. The Admiral's tentacles writhed nervously as he absorbed the information. These nuclear weapons they developed. The survey team estimates they built enough to destroy their entire planet several times over? Correct. And they pointed them at each other for decades in what they called a Cold War. The psychological profile suggests they were genuinely prepared to end their own civilization rather than surrender to enemies. Roth collapsed into his chair. Number. Species develops that level of destructive capability and survives. It's impossible. Every civilization that reaches nuclear technology either destroys itself or abandons warfare entirely. How did they avoid extinction? Webb pulled up another section of the human files. They developed something called mutually assured destruction, the concept that if everyone can destroy everyone else, nobody will start a war. It's completely insane by our standards, but it worked for them. And now they're developing space. Travel? Roth asked, though he already knew the answer. Their first manned space missions were military in nature. They used ballistic missile technology to reach orbit. Even their peaceful space program was driven by competition between hostile nations. They literally raced each other to their moon as a demonstration of military superiority. The Admiral stood and walked to the display showing Earth's current status. What's their present military capability? Webb's voice dropped to a whisper. Admiral, they currently maintain enough nuclear weapons to sterilize most inhabited worlds in this sector. Their conventional military forces are organized around the principle of overwhelming firepower and acceptable losses. They have detailed plans for fighting wars in space, on planets, underwater, and even underground. Acceptable losses? Roth repeated. They calculate how many of their own people they're willing to sacrifice to achieve military objectives. The numbers range from thousands to millions, depending on what they're fighting for. Roth stared at the peaceful blue-green world spinning slowly in the hologram. This doesn't match their cultural emissions. Their entertainment media, their art, their literature. Much of it seems to value peace and cooperation. That's what makes them so disturbing, Admiral. They simultaneously love peace and excel at war. They write beautiful poetry about the horrors of battle while developing ever more efficient ways to kill each other. Their contradictions wrapped in flesh. The communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. Admiral Roth, the Hegemony Empire has requested information about potential targets in the Outer Rim territories. They've specifically inquired about the Sol system. Roth and Webb exchanged glances. The Hegemony was known for its aggressive expansion policies and overwhelming military force. They had conquered dozens of worlds with minimal resistance. Admiral, we have to warn them, Webb said urgently. Warn them? These humans appear to be the most militarily dangerous species we've ever encountered. Exactly. The Hegemony has no idea what they're about to encounter. They're expecting another peaceful farming world. If they attack Earth with a standard conquest fleet, it could trigger something unprecedented. Roth considered this. The humans have never fought an interstellar war. They might not be prepared for space combat. Webb highlighted another section of the human data. Admiral, they've been preparing for interstellar war since they first looked up at the stars. They have contingency plans for fighting alien invasions, defending against asteroid impacts, and evacuating their entire population to other worlds. They've thought of everything, the Admiral made his decision. Send a priority message to the Hegemony High Command. Recommend they avoid the Sol system until we can complete a full diplomatic assessment. Will they listen? Roth's expression was grim. Probably not. The Hegemony considers our recommendations as suggestions at best. Webb gathered his files and prepared to leave. What should I do with the human assessment? File it under extreme caution and prepare a full briefing for the Federation Council. If the Hegemony ignores our warning and attacks these humans, we need to be ready for the consequences. As Webb left the conference room, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to witness something that would change the galaxy forever. The humans were still developing their space capabilities, still learning about the wider universe. But if their history was any indication, they would adapt to interstellar warfare with the same terrifying efficiency they had brought to every other conflict in their bloody past. The warning lights bathed Earth's orbital defense station in red as proximity alarms screamed across every channel. Commander Gray wiped sweat from her forehead and stared at the tactical display showing 37 massive ships approaching from beyond Neptune's orbit. They moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the distinctive markings of the Hegemony Empire. Ma'am, incoming transmission on all frequencies, Communications Officer Price reported from his station. Put it through. The main screen flickered to life, showing a reptilian creature in elaborate military dress. Its scales were deep purple, and its eyes held the cold confidence of a predator that had never known defeat. Primitive inhabitants of Sol 3. I am War Commander Drex of the Hegemony Conquest Fleet. Your world has been selected for integration into our empire. Surrender immediately and your deaths will be swift. Gray turned to her weapons officer. How long until our fleet can respond? 15 minutes for the first wave, ma'am. Admiral Carter is mobilizing everything we have. Gray nodded and opened a channel to Earth's hastily assembled defense force. Most of their ships were cargo haulers fitted with missile pods, mining vessels equipped with plasma cutters, and the handful of actual military craft that humanity had managed to build in the past decade since achieving reliable interplanetary travel. This is Commander Gray to all ships. We've got 37 hostiles inbound. They expect us to roll over like every other species they've conquered. They don't know humans. The response came from dozens of voices across the fleet. Cargo ship captains who had volunteered their vessels, mining crews who had welded armor plating to their industrial ships, and the crews of humanity's few proper warships. They all shared the same grim determination that had carried their species through countless wars. First wave, launch in 60 seconds, Gray ordered. The hegemony fleet had stopped just outside Mars orbit, apparently waiting for humanity's surrender. Their ships were impressive works of engineering, smooth and efficient, designed to overawe primitive species into submission. They had conquered 47 worlds using the same tactics, the same overwhelming display of superior technology. Humanity's response fleet emerged from Earth's shadow like a swarm of angry insects. The ships were crewed by galactic standards, assembled from whatever materials could be found and fitted with weapons that seemed primitive compared to hegemony technology. But they moved with purpose, spreading out in attack formations that hegemony had never encountered before. War Commander Drex observed the approaching human fleet with amusement. Pathetic. Their largest ship is smaller than our shuttles, ready all weapons. We'll end this quickly. The battle began as Drex expected. Hegemony plasma cannons lanced out across space, striking human ships with devastating effect. Several cargo haulers exploded immediately, their crude armor no match for advanced alien weapons. But instead of retreating or surrendering, the human fleet pressed forward with shocking aggression. What are they doing? Drex's tactical officer asked as a damaged human freighter accelerated directly toward their flagship. Evasive maneuvers, Drex shouted, but it was too late. The freighter? Its hull breached and atmosphere venting smashed into the hegemony vessel's port side. The explosion tore a massive hole in both ships. This was not how conquered species were supposed to behave. The human tactics defied everything the hegemony understood about warfare. Damaged ships didn't retreat for repairs, they threw themselves at enemy vessels in suicidal attacks. Outgunned vessels didn't surrender, they used their destruction as weapons. Most disturbing of all, human ships seemed to target wounded hegemony vessels, finishing off damaged enemies instead of engaging fresh opponents. Sir, they're broadcasting on all frequencies, the communications officer reported. What are they saying? It's not directed at us, sir. They're talking to each other, sharing target information, coordinating attacks, and... The officer paused, his scales pale with shock. And what? They're volunteering for suicide runs, sir. Ships are requesting permission to ram our vessels. Drex watched in horror as a human. Mining ship, its entire front section replaced with what appeared to be a massive bomb, accelerated toward one of his cruisers. The cruiser's weapons tore the mining ship apart, but the explosion still caught them in its blast radius, crippling their engines. These creatures are insane, Drex muttered. The battle continued for 6 hours, far longer than any hegemony conquest in recorded history. Human reinforcements kept arriving from Earth, Luna, and the asteroid belt. Some were military vessels, others were converted civilian ships crewed by volunteers. They all fought with the same terrifying determination, treating their own deaths as acceptable costs for damaging the enemy. By the time Admiral Carter arrived with Earth's actual military fleet, the hegemony force had been reduced to 19 ships. The human defenders had lost nearly twice as many vessels, but their crews had died fighting instead of surrendering, and their sacrifice had bloodied an enemy that had expected easy victory. War Commander Drex, this is Admiral Carter of the Earth Defense Force. I'm giving you one opportunity to withdraw from our system. Drex stared at the human admiral on his screen. Carter was an older man with gray hair and scars on his face, wearing a simple blue uniform. He looked nothing like the terrifying warrior kings that ruled the hegemony, yet something in his eyes made Drex's blood run cold. "You dare threaten us? We are the hegemony empire. We have conquered dozens of worlds." Carter's expression didn't change. "War Commander, you just spent 6 hours fighting converted cargo ships and mining vessels. Our actual military hasn't engaged yet. You have 10 minutes to leave our system before we show you what humans do to invaders." The tactical display showed the fresh human forces that had just arrived. These ships were different from the desperate defenders who had fought so far. They were sleek, purpose-built warships, bristling with weapons that registered as far more advanced than the crude equipment on the earlier vessels. "Impossible," Drex whispered. "The survey said they were primitives." 9 minutes, Carter announced calmly. Drex looked at his remaining fleet. 19 ships against what appeared to be at least 30 human warships, supported by countless smaller vessels that had proven they would fight to the death. His crews were shaken by the ferocity they had already witnessed, and the new human fleet looked far more dangerous than anything they had faced so far. "All ships, prepare for withdrawal," Drex ordered. As the hegemony fleet retreated beyond the edge of the Sol system, War Commander Drex composed his report for the High Command. How could he explain that a species the Federation had classified as peaceful farmers had fought like demons? How could he describe the horror of watching primitive cargo ships deliberately crash into his vessels, their crews singing as they died? The humans had shown mercy by allowing his retreat, but Drex knew it wasn't kindness. They had demonstrated their capabilities and wanted survivors to carry the message back to the galaxy. Earth was not a defenseless farming world to be easily conquered. It was the home of something far more dangerous than the hegemony had ever encountered. As his damaged flagship limped toward the nearest hegemony outpost, Drex couldn't shake the image of Admiral Carter's cold eyes. The human had looked at him like a professional evaluating a problem to be solved. There had been no hatred, no anger, just a calm assessment of a predator deciding whether prey was worth the effort to kill. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had been preparing for interstellar war long before they achieved interstellar travel. The greatest minds of the galaxy sat in stunned silence as Professor Mills stepped up to the podium in the Grand Assembly Hall. Representatives from 300 worlds had gathered for this unprecedented session of the Galactic Council, all hoping to understand what had happened at Sol 3. The hegemony survivors' reports had spread panic across civilized space, but nobody believed the stories of cargo ships ramming warships and farmers fighting like demons. Mills connected her data pad to the hall's massive holographic projectors and looked out at the assembled delegates. She was a small woman with graying hair, wearing a simple Earth University sweater that looked almost comical among the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor of galactic dignitaries. But her eyes held the same cold calculation that had unnerved War Commander Drex. "Honored delegates," Mills began, her voice carrying clearly across the vast chamber. "I am here to present humanity's complete military archives. I believe this will help you understand what your forces encountered in our system." The first hologram materialized above the assembly, showing primitive humans wielding stone axes and spears. Several delegates relaxed slightly, recognizing the familiar pattern of early tool development that most species followed. "This is how we began," Mills explained. "But notice something unusual. These early weapons weren't designed for hunting animals or cutting plants. They were specifically crafted for killing other humans." The display shifted to show ancient battlefields covered with human corpses, primitive weapons scattered among the dead. Mills advanced through thousands of years of human history with disturbing efficiency. Bronze swords designed to penetrate armor, iron weapons that could cleave through bone, steel blades engineered for maximum lethality. Most species develop tools for survival and then adapt them for warfare when necessary, Mills continued. Humans developed warfare as a tool for survival and then adapted everything else around it. The Roman legions appeared in the hologram, their disciplined formations marching across continents. Then medieval knights with weapons designed purely for killing other armored humans. Then cannon that could breach fortress walls. Each advancement was explained with the same academic detachment that Mills might use to discuss crop rotation or weather patterns. A delegate from the Peaceful Worlds Coalition stood up. "Professor, surely this primitive violence decreased as your species became more civilized?" Mills smiled, and several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Delegate Thompson, you've misunderstood human development. We became more civilized by becoming more efficient at warfare." The hologram shifted to show the American Civil War, with its industrial-scale killing and massive casualty lists. Then the First World War appeared, complete with poison gas attacks and artillery bombardments that lasted for months. The assembled delegates watched in growing horror as Mills calmly explained how humans had weaponized chemistry, industrialized killing, and treated million-person casualties as acceptable losses. This conflict killed nearly 40 million humans. Mills noted as images of the Second World War filled the display. We had developed aerial bombardment, mechanized warfare, and systematic genocide. We also created the first nuclear weapons during this period. The hologram showed mushroom clouds rising over Japanese cities. The delegates sat in complete silence, many covering their eyes or turning away from the display. Mills continued her presentation without pause, describing megatonnage and radiation effects with the same tone others might use to discuss farming techniques. By 1960, humans had built enough nuclear weapons to destroy every major population center on our planet. Multiple times. We pointed them at each other for 40 years. A hegemony general who had survived the Sol 3 encounter spoke up. "Professor, how did your species avoid extinction? Every civilization that develops such weapons destroys itself within a generation." "We created a doctrine called mutually assured destruction," Mills replied, bringing up diagrams showing missile trajectories and target lists. "If anyone launched nuclear weapons, everyone would die. This encouraged peace through terror rather than cooperation." The display showed the Cold War period, with submarines armed with city-killing missiles hidden in Earth's oceans and silos scattered across continents, all aimed at population centers. The psychological profiles of human leaders willing to end civilization rather than surrender made several delegates physically ill. "But this was your past," insisted a Federation counselor. "Surely modern humans have abandoned such barbaric thinking?" Mills advanced the display to show recent human conflicts. Precision-guided missiles that could strike targets from orbit, drones that killed remotely, cyber warfare that could destroy entire technological infrastructures, biological weapons that could target specific genetic markers. The weapons had become more precise but no less deadly. "These are our current capabilities," Mills said, showing Earth's present military inventory. "We maintain enough nuclear weapons to sterilize most inhabited worlds in this sector. Our conventional forces are organized around the principle of overwhelming firepower and acceptable losses." The display shifted to show human military doctrine, the concept of total war where entire populations became valid targets, the willingness to sacrifice millions of their own people to achieve strategic objectives, the detailed plans for fighting in space, underwater, underground, and in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "You must understand," Mills continued, "humans don't fight wars to win territory or resources. We fight wars to completely destroy our enemy's ability to threaten us. We prefer to eliminate problems rather than manage them." A shaken delegate from the hegemony capital world stood up. "Professor, our forces encountered human cargo ships that deliberately crashed into our warships. Their crews were singing as they died. How do you explain such behavior?" Mills brought up recordings from the recent battle. Human voices could be heard over radio communications, coordinating suicide attacks while singing traditional war songs. The contrast between their cheerful voices and their deadly intentions was deeply disturbing to species that viewed death as something to be avoided at all costs. Delegate, humans have been dying for causes greater than themselves for millennia. We call it sacrifice and we consider it noble. Those cargo ship crews knew they were saving their homeworld by stopping your invasion. Their deaths had meaning. The final section of Mills' presentation showed human plans for interstellar warfare. Detailed strategies for fighting enemies across multiple star systems. Contingency plans for evacuating Earth's entire population to continue fighting from hidden colonies. Theoretical weapons that could destroy stars or collapse dimensional barriers. We've been preparing for galactic warfare since we first looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. Mills concluded. We assumed it would be hostile. The Grand Assembly Hall fell silent as the holographic displays faded. 300 civilizations had just witnessed the complete military history of a species that treated planet-killing weapons as standard equipment and million-person casualties as acceptable losses. Finally, the Federation High Chancellor spoke. Professor Mills, does humanity desire peace with the galactic community? Mills smiled again, and the temperature in the hall seemed to drop. Chancellor, humans always desire peace. But we've learned that the most reliable way to achieve peace is to make war too costly for our enemies to consider. We're willing to cooperate with anyone who approaches us peacefully. We're equally prepared to destroy anyone who threatens us. As Mills gathered her data pads and prepared to leave, she added one final comment that would be remembered long after the session ended. Oh, and delegates, everything I've shown you represents humanity at peace. We consider our current era one of unprecedented tranquility. You haven't seen us during wartime yet. The silence that followed Professor Mills' departure lasted for nearly an hour. When the delegates finally began to speak again, their conversations focused on a single question. How do you coexist with a species that has spent its entire existence perfecting the art of war? News of Professor Mills' presentation spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communications could carry it. Within days, every civilized world had access to humanity's complete military archives, and the reaction was immediate terror. Species that had spent centuries building peaceful societies suddenly found themselves studying the warfare techniques of creatures who had never stopped fighting. Colonel Davis arrived at the Federation capital aboard a ship that looked deceptively peaceful. The vessel appeared to be a standard diplomatic transport, but intelligence reports suggested it carried enough firepower to level a small moon. Davis himself was unremarkable by human standards, a middle-aged man with short brown hair and the kind of calm demeanor that came from decades of military service. The hegemony delegation had demanded an emergency session to address the human threat before these murder apes could develop further. War Commander Drex, still recovering from his encounter at Sol 3, paced nervously in the waiting area as Davis and his small team prepared for what everyone assumed would be peace negotiations. Remember, Drex muttered to his aide, these creatures treat death as an acceptable outcome. Don't let their calm appearance fool you. They're the most dangerous species we've ever encountered. Davis entered the negotiation chamber carrying a simple briefcase and wearing the kind of friendly smile that humans use during diplomatic meetings. He nodded politely to the assembled representatives and took his seat at the conference table, as if attending a routine business meeting. Gentlemen, Davis began, his voice pleasant and conversational, I understand there have been some concerns about humanity's integration into the galactic community. I'm here to address those concerns and hopefully put everyone at ease. The Federation mediator, a peaceful herbivore from the Tau Ceti system, opened the session. Colonel Davis, the Hegemony Empire, has expressed serious reservations about humanity's military capabilities. They're requesting restrictions on human space travel and weapons development. Davis smiled wider. Of course, I completely understand their concerns. Let me show you what we've prepared. He opened his briefcase and activated a small holographic projector. The display showed Earth's current military status in real time, updated to the minute. Every ship, every weapon, every strategic installation was laid out with terrifying precision. As you can see, we currently have operational bases on Luna, Mars, 3 asteroid stations, and 17 deep space platforms. Each installation is equipped with enough firepower to sterilize any inhabited world within 50 light-years of Earth. The delegates stared at the display in shock. The humans had been busy during the months since first contact, building a military infrastructure that dwarfed anything most species had ever conceived. War Commander Drex's scales had gone pale. Colonel, are you threatening the galactic community? Not at all, Davis replied cheerfully. I'm simply providing full disclosure of our defensive capabilities. We believe in transparency in all our relationships. The display shifted to show detailed schematics of human weapons systems, planet-cracking missiles, stellar disruption devices, and something called dimensional collapse bombs. That could apparently destroy entire star systems by folding space-time in on itself. These are theoretical weapons, of course, Davis explained casually. We haven't had occasion to test them on actual targets yet. A delegate from the Peaceful Worlds Coalition spoke up in a shaking voice. Colonel, these weapons could destroy entire civilizations? Why would you build such things? Davis looked genuinely puzzled by the question. Delegate Harrison, these are standard defensive systems. Every human world maintains similar capabilities. We learned long ago that the best way to prevent wars is to make them too costly for potential enemies. The hologram updated to show human strategic doctrine. The assembled delegates read in horror as Davis explained concepts like acceptable losses, total warfare, and mutually assured destruction, as if they were basic principles that any civilized species would understand. Now, regarding the hegemony's concerns, Davis continued, bringing up a new section of the display. We've identified all major military installations within your territory and developed appropriate response plans. The hologram showed detailed maps of hegemony. Worlds with every defensive position, every fleet base, and every population center clearly marked. Projected casualty figures appeared next to each target, calculated with the same precision that accountants might use for budget planning. In the event of renewed hostilities, we estimate 17 hours to neutralize your military capabilities. And 48 hours for complete pacification of your territory, Davis explained matter-of-factly. These projections assume you'll fight to the last individual as we would. War Commander Drex stood up abruptly, his chair clattering to the floor. This is madness. You're discussing the extermination of entire worlds as if it were a business transaction. Davis looked genuinely confused. War Commander, we're simply sharing our strategic assessments. If the hegemony doesn't intend to attack human territory, then these plans will never be implemented. We're a peaceful species. The irony was lost on no one in the room. Davis continued his presentation with the same friendly demeanor, explaining how humans had already war-gamed conflicts with every major galactic power. The Federation, the hegemony, the Peaceful Worlds Coalition, even the mysterious deep space communes had all been analyzed and categorized as potential threats. We've also prepared contingencies for alliance warfare, Davis added, bringing up scenarios where multiple galactic powers might unite against humanity. In such cases, we would implement what we call total response doctrine, complete elimination of all threats, regardless of collateral damage. The silence in the room was deafening. Davis had just described the systematic extermination of galactic civilization as a policy option. Delivered with the same tone he might use to discuss lunch plans, a Federation admiral finally spoke up. Colonel, you're describing genocide on a galactic scale. Only if necessary, Davis replied with another pleasant smile. We much prefer peaceful coexistence. But we've learned from our history that peace is only maintained when potential aggressors understand the cost of aggression. The holographic display shifted one final time, showing Earth's long-term strategic plans. Human colonies were spreading throughout local space, each one equipped with the same devastating military capabilities as the homeworld. Within a generation, humanity would have enough firepower positioned throughout the galaxy to enforce their version of peace through overwhelming threat. Gentlemen, I want to assure you that humanity seeks nothing but friendship with our galactic neighbors, Davis concluded, powering down his display. We're prepared to contribute to galactic peace, prosperity, and cooperation. All we ask in return is that everyone remember what happens to species that threaten human interests. As Davis packed up his briefcase and prepared to leave, War Commander Drex found his voice. Colonel, what if someone refuses to accept human terms? Davis paused at the door and looked back with the same friendly expression he had maintained throughout the meeting. War Commander, in our history, that problem tends to solve itself fairly quickly. After the human delegation left, the conference room remained silent for a long time. Finally, the Federation mediator spoke up. I believe we need to revise our approach to galactic relations. The hegemony delegation was already drafting new policies that classified human space as permanently off-limits to military operations. The Peaceful Worlds Coalition began preparing diplomatic outreach programs focused on keeping humanity happy and non-threatening. Even the mysterious deep space communes sent messages indicating their desire for friendly relations with Earth within hours of Davis' presentation. Every major galactic power had implemented the same strategy: avoid conflict with humans at all costs. Not because they respected human military capabilities, but because they were absolutely terrified of what would happen if humanity decided that peace had failed. The galaxy had learned a fundamental lesson about human nature. They were indeed a peaceful species, but only because they had made war too terrifying for anyone else to contemplate. The galaxy had been quiet for 6 months since Colonel Davis' presentation, but it was the kind of silence that comes before thunder. General Stone walked through the corridors of what had once been the Federation Military Academy and was now the headquarters of the Terran Peacekeeping Command. The irony wasn't lost on him that an institution dedicated to preventing war was now run by the most war-capable species in known space. Stone paused at the observation deck overlooking the training grounds where former hegemony shock troops practiced alongside Federation Marines and Peaceful World security forces. They were learning human tactical doctrine not because they wanted to, but because every galactic military had realized the same terrifying truth. If you couldn't fight like humans, you couldn't fight at all in the new galaxy. General, the morning briefing is ready, announced Lieutenant Park, his aide-de-camp. She was young for her rank, but she had survived the Battle of Salthree and earned her position through the kind of calm competence that humans valued in combat veterans. Stone entered the command center where holographic displays showed the current status of galactic conflicts. The numbers were remarkable. Armed conflicts had dropped by 78% since humanity joined the galactic community. Not through diplomacy or peace treaties, but through the simple understanding that any war might escalate to include human intervention. What's our situation report? Stone asked, settling into his command chair. Quiet across all sectors, sir, reported Commander Torres from the intelligence station. The hegemony is requesting mediation assistance with their border dispute with the Tau Alliance. The Federation wants our help resolving mining rights in the Vega system, and the deep space communes are asking for protection from raiders. Stone nodded. Standard peacekeeping requests? What's our response status? Third Fleet is positioned for rapid deployment to any sector. Admiral Kim has her ships ready to move within 6 hours of receiving orders. The general studied the tactical displays showing human naval assets positioned throughout local galactic space. Every major trade route, every strategic system, every potential conflict zone had human ships nearby. Not occupying or controlling, just present and ready to respond to any outbreak of violence. Sir, incoming transmission from the Hegemony High Command, announced the communications officer, the main screen activated to show War Commander Drex, now bearing the scars and haunted expression of someone who had seen human warfare firsthand. His once proud bearing had been replaced by the nervous deference that most galactic military leaders now showed when dealing with humans. General Stone, I regret to inform you that negotiations with the Tau Alliance have broken down. They're demanding territorial concessions that the Empire cannot accept. We formally request human mediation under the Galactic Peace Accords. Stone leaned back in his chair. War Commander, what's your assessment of Tau military capabilities? They have approximately 400 ships and ground forces numbering in the millions. Standard galactic military organization. And your forces? 600 ships and twice their ground forces? We could achieve victory within weeks using conventional tactics. Stone smiled and Drex visibly flinched. Even through the holographic display, the hegemony commander could sense the predatory calculation that lurked behind human expressions of amusement. War Commander, you're asking for my help to avoid a war you could easily win. Why? Drex's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of stress among his species. General, our intelligence services have analyzed human intervention protocols. Any conflict involving major galactic powers has a 47% probability of human military involvement. If we fight the Tau Alliance and you decide our methods are too aggressive, the consequences would be catastrophic for both sides. You're afraid we might decide you're both threats to galactic peace? Yes, sir. Stone turned to his staff. Commander Torres, what's the human position on this dispute? Both sides have legitimate grievances, sir. The Tau Alliance is expanding into traditionally hegemony space, but the hegemony's response has been disproportionate. Standard territorial dispute with historical precedent. Recommendation? Partition the disputed systems. Give the Tau Alliance access to the mining rights they need. Allow the hegemony to maintain territorial integrity. Both sides lose something but avoid total war. Stone nodded and turned back to Drex. War Commander, here's what's going to happen. You're going to accept partition of the disputed systems. The Tau Alliance is going to accept limited mining rights instead of full territorial control. Both sides will sign a non-aggression pact. For 50 years? Any questions? Sir, what if the Tau Alliance refuses these terms? Stone's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes made Drex step back from his own display. War Commander, they won't refuse. The transmission ended, and Stone turned to his communications officer. Get me Tau Alliance High Command. Within minutes, the main screen showed a different alien leader, this one with the delicate features and large eyes of a species evolved from prey animals. High Chancellor Veth of the Tau Alliance was already trembling before Stone spoke a word. Chancellor, I understand you're having a territorial dispute with the Hegemony Empire. General Stone, we cannot accept their demands. Our people need access to those mining systems for our industrial development. We're prepared to fight for our rights. Stone pulled up a holographic display showing the disputed territory. Chancellor, you're going to accept partition of the systems in question. You'll receive mining rights to 60% of the asteroid fields and access to 3 of the 5 inhabited worlds. The hegemony keeps territorial sovereignty. Non-aggression pact for 50 years. But General, this gives us less than we were demanding. Chancellor, it also gives you more than you'll have if this escalates to human intervention. The threat didn't need to be stated explicitly. Everyone in the galaxy had seen Professor Mill's presentation. Everyone knew what happened when humans decided that a problem needed to be solved permanently. We accept your terms, General. After both communications ended, Lieutenant Park approached with a datapad. Sir, that's the 14th territorial dispute we've resolved this month. All through threat of intervention rather than actual force. Stone reviewed the statistics on his pad. Galactic military spending had dropped 40% as species. Realized that human peacekeeping made traditional armies largely irrelevant. Trade had increased dramatically as shipping lanes became safer under human protection. Even piracy had virtually disappeared once raiders learned that attacking merchant vessels might provoke human retaliation. General, there's something else, Park continued. Intelligence reports that several species are beginning to adopt human cultural practices. Military academies are teaching human tactical doctrine. Some worlds are implementing human-style government structures focused on rapid military response. Stone wasn't surprised. They're learning to think like us because they're afraid of us. Is that a problem, sir? Stone walked back to the observation deck and watched alien soldiers learning human combat techniques. In the distance, mixed crews of humans and aliens worked together on joint military exercises. The galaxy was changing, adapting to accommodate the reality of human military supremacy. Lieutenant, 6 months ago, the galaxy was heading toward a major war between the hegemony and the Federation. The Tau Alliance was planning expansion campaigns. The deep space communes were organizing, raiding fleets. Now they're all asking us to solve their problems peacefully, because they're afraid of what happens if they don't. Exactly, we've achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. Universal peace through universal fear. A new transmission. Alert chimed, and Stone returned to the command center. The display showed a group of young humans in a civilian setting, apparently in some kind of recreational facility on Earth. "Sir, this is a routine cultural monitoring feed from Earth," explained the communications officer. The Federation Cultural Exchange Program requested access to human civilian activities. On the screen, human children were playing what appeared to be a tactical simulation game. They moved toy soldiers across a miniature battlefield, planning complex maneuvers and discussing casualty ratios with the same casual attitude their parents might use to discuss sports scores. One child, who couldn't have been older than 10, was explaining to his friend how to achieve maximum effectiveness in a flanking maneuver. You have to accept losing half your force to break through their defensive line, but once you're behind them, you can eliminate their entire army. Another child nodded seriously. "My dad says the key is making sure the enemy can't surrender. If they can't give up, they have to keep fighting until they're all dead." Stone noticed that several alien observers were watching the feed with expressions of barely controlled horror. What humans considered normal childhood play would be classified as advanced military training by most galactic species. "General," Lieutenant Park said quietly, "the aliens are starting to understand something else about us." "What's that?" "This is how we raise our children. Every human grows up learning tactical thinking, acceptable losses, and strategic planning. We're not just a military species. We're a species where every individual is a potential military asset." Stone nodded as he watched the children continue their game. "Lieutenant, that might be the most terrifying realization they've had yet." The galaxy had accepted human leadership not because humans were the strongest or most advanced, but because they had finally encountered a species that approached warfare as naturally as breathing, in trying to avoid human military intervention. Every other species had effectively surrendered control of galactic affairs to the one civilization that had never stopped preparing for war. And in the quiet moments between crises, when human children played war games that would terrify alien generals, everyone began to understand that this was just the beginning of humanity's influence on galactic civilization.